Give me a little intro there, Gomer.
You're listening to episode 63 of the Station 71 podcast. My name's Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Beth
and Brian.
So this week we are going to talk a little bit about some history, and feels very weird to be back after like 2 weeks off. I have to get that out of the way right away.
Yeah.
I'm knocking some of the rust off, and I feel very strange right now. But let's dive into the news and talk about that to start this off. So we got a preview for Kingdom Hearts 3 coming to Disney Springs on December 14th. Guests will be able to experience the some of the Kingdom Hearts 3 game and see a Keyblade exhibit with some special artwork. I know some of us on this show are Kingdom Hearts fans, so I wanted to plug this in here real quick before we get rolling with some park news.
Yeah, this is exciting. I mean, how long ago did Kingdom Hearts 2 come out? It's been
it's been like 10 years.
Yeah, pretty good gap between them, so I'm sure this is going to be a huge draw.
It's time. We need a new game. And January 31st is when this closes down, so you'll get a chance to see this up until the end of January. If you're going to be in Disney, take a chance to sit down and play some of the game, even if you haven't played any of the other Kingdom Hearts games before. Definitely guarantee that any Disney fan will really enjoy this series. So after that, we've got some closures and some construction updates. I'm going to lump these two together just because pretty straightforward. A friendship boat service to Epcot will be temporarily unavailable due to the Skyliner construction. And as we kind of talked about before, the railroad will actually be closing down for a little bit because of the Tron Coaster construction. Looks like the railroad will be reopening in early 2019, and I actually don't have the date. Work is supposed to last until, you know what? It might even be over at this point. I really got to read these news stories. So if it's not...
Wait, are we talking about the railroad?
No, the friendship
Skyliner
boats.
Oh, no, it's through mid-December, I believe, or early December, so I don't know if it's quite yet, but I haven't heard otherwise. I was actually looking into this earlier today because I am leaving to go to Disney tomorrow and was trying to figure out if I could ride the boats or if I needed to walk.
Well, when this episode comes out on the 11th, that's going to be mid-December, so it may still be closed for a couple days. Yeah, so I dropped the ball on that one big time.
I don't understand why they are stopping the boat service, but because of construction, but the walkway is still available.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah, it's just like, what are they, short-staffed or something? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it just runs too close to the exit, and they're trying to like avoid people. I don't know. I really can't. Like, even looking at the pictures, I don't have a very good explanation for that one.
I know what it is. They want people to get those extra steps and getting to the new bus like loop.
Boy. So our last piece of news story, and this is one that I'm very excited about, even though it's nothing to do with our park. We got a look at a new attraction, the Beauty and the Beast Dark Ride that's going to be coming to Tokyo Disneyland. The Disney Parks blog released a video on their YouTube channel today detailing some of the animatronics, giving the attraction its name and revealing some concept art. The new attraction is to be called Enchanted Tale of Beauty and the Beast, and it features some very stunning audio animatronic figures. I'm so excited about this, even though I will probably never see it.
Yeah, these animatronics look awesome.
And, my biggest takeaway from this is they're not projection faced.
Yes.
So I'm beyond excited about that.
I'm very excited about the ride system. For anybody that hasn't seen it, check out Mystic Manor. There's plenty of YouTube videos to see. It uses a trackless ride system and it allows the seat that you're in to do all kind of cool stuff. And from this video, it looks like they're using a very, very similar one for this new Beauty and the Beast ride. And it looks very cool. Looks like it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for how they're pointing you in directions and kind of interacting with the ride. But I'm really excited about this technology coming back to Disney World so that we'll have a chance to see it.
So I'm kind of speculating here, and I don't know if I'm going to if I'm just overthinking this in my head, but I'm looking at these concept arts and there's a couple scenes from the attraction, like them dancing in the ballroom, the Be Our Guest scene. One scene that I think would be really cool, and I want to see a Disney or Imagineers take on it. I want to see the transformation scene in this attraction. And
That would be cool.
I want to see them pull some crazy Imagineer magic that only they can pull.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think that they do it well enough in the stage show, Mario?
God, no. Please
Where they
stop.
hold up a sheet?
That's kind of why I want to see it.
That's what they're going to do. They're going to have two cast members just shaking a sheet up there.
They're just going to run out in the middle of the show. Hold on, guys, it's coming.
Boy.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. Well, that said, we blew through the news pretty quick. Are you guys ready to talk about this week's topic?
Yes.
So we decided that because we've taken a couple days off from recording and gave ourselves a mini vacation, we were going to come back strong with a history episode. I know everybody kind of really likes these, and I actually found some pretty interesting stuff here. So we're going to be doing Splash Mountain this week. There was one that was requested. Shoot, who requested this? I am way off my game on this one.
It feels like it was a while ago that it was requested, so we are finally getting around to it.
Yeah, we are finally getting through some of these topics. It was actually requested by a couple people, so not too far off on that one. But
not to discourage any of our listeners, we'll get to them eventually, but keep the suggestions coming.
yeah, sometimes we get a little backed up on those. But let's dive into this history lesson that we've got here. It looks like you've got a couple things about the actual movie itself. I know we talked about that a little bit in our movie rundown, but let's take this one a little bit in depth because this is an interesting movie to kind of unpack here.
Yes, interesting. I think that Splash Mountain is very, very heavily based on the movie, more so than a lot of attractions I feel like around the park that are pulled from Disney IPs. And it's especially weird that Splash Mountain does that, considering how much Disney has kind of tried to distance himself from this movie. But regardless, Song of the South was released in 1946, and it was based on the Uncle Remus stories, who were written by Joe Chandler Harris. A little aside, growing up, my parents had a house in Edenton, Georgia, which is where Joel Chandler Harris is from. And for anybody that's ever been there, there is not much at all in Edenton, but there is an Uncle Remus museum, which is based on this story, this collection of stories. So it does. It's interesting. I've been to it once. It's mainly just it's like outdoors. It's a collection of like small little shacks, kind of centered around the stories with some props and stuff in it. But yeah. Anyways, Joel Chandler Harris grew up during the Civil War, and a lot of the stories that he collected from slaves and former slaves after the war, he compiled into these short stories, and he began writing them, and some of them got published in the Atlanta Constitution, and eventually he ended up writing multiple books about it. But these collections of stories were what Disney decided to take and base the movie on. So back to this, it's 1946 when this movie gets released, and I think it's important to remember that at the time, this is coming right on the heels of World War II. Disney was not in a really great financial state at this time, and this is when they were putting out, a lot of their cheaper movies. This is,
the package films.
The package films. You had Make Mine Music come out right before this. Not exactly Disney's high point. But what Disney decided to do with this was that they took live action and mixed it with animation, because the animated portions of movies took so long and were so expensive to produce that they kind of, I don't want to say cheapened it out, but they sprinkled in live action with it to, make it more cost effective to produce. So with that, they kind of use the live action, I feel like, is its own separate plot as kind of a way to get to the animated sequences. But for anyone that's seen it, I think it kind of works. It's nice to have the stories kind of break up the main plot of the live action. But I'll give a quick rundown of the plot for anyone that hasn't seen it. I'm assuming that's a lot of people, considering how hard it is to find a copy of this. This movie was never released on home video in America. It was in Europe and in other areas across the world, but
I believe it's still distributed through other countries too. So if
yes.
you really wanted, you probably could get an import of this movie, but that's probably the only way you're going to see it legally.
Yep.
Legally.
So the plot of this movie is that there's a young boy named Johnny. I guess it's important to note too that the plot of this movie is set during Reconstruction, almost immediately after the Civil War.
But it's also not explicitly stated that it's set there.
Correct, which we'll see led to a lot of controversy.
Right.
But 7-year-old Johnny is going with his parents to stay at his grandparents' plantation in Georgia. When they arrive at the plantation, he finds out that his parents are splitting up somewhat. They're this kind of weird separation, divorce type thing going on. It's never really explicitly stated. But so as soon as they get there, his father leaves him. Johnny gets upset and runs away from the plantation house, and he stumbles upon Uncle Remus, who is one of the workers on the farm. Again, this is where it's kind of awkward to say because they never come right out and say former slaves. They don't really address why the African American people are, obviously they're working on the farm, but they don't really give the background as to, what's actually going on here, which again led to plenty of controversy. But Johnny stumbles upon him, and he's telling a story to a number of the other workers on the farm. Anyways, Uncle Remus realizes that Johnny's run away, and he tells him a story to comfort him, and it's the story of Brer Rabbit earns $1 every minute. This basically breaks down to Brer Fox has set up a trap to catch someone who is stealing his crops. Brer Rabbit ends up getting caught in the trap because he's stealing his crops. Brer Bear comes by, and Brer Rabbit tells him that he's earning $1 a minute from Brer Fox, who is paying him to basically be a scarecrow in this trap and scare away the crows. So Brer Bear says, well, I want to do it. So he helps Brer Rabbit out of the trap, ties himself up in it, and then Brer Rabbit gets away. You can see kind of a snippet of this in the attraction, in the scene where Brer Bear is caught up in the trap, tied up in the tree with the rope. So that's one little piece of the movie that made it into the plot of the attraction.
I think that's one of the things that the attraction did really well. We'll get into the history of that later, but it did really well with incorporating these tales and not giving them too much context. Mm-hmm. But it also doesn't need context, which is weird.
Right. Which, it also brings to the point, they could have really just released this as a collection of the Uncle Remus short stories without the live action plot. And I feel like without that, there would have been almost no controversy with this.
So I know we're kind of skipping ahead here. There's a couple things that like I've thought about after watching this movie when we did our movie rundown that maybe could have saved this movie. Like even just putting a title card, letting you know when it was set, that might have helped it a little bit because it would have released maybe some of the tension on what, you know, some of these people are in the movie. And it also probably would have helped if they were a little more explicit to say that they weren't actually slaves still.
Right.
Or to like kind of move away from the stereotype of, I guess the one thing that it always gets called out for is the happy working slave stereotype. And if they did anything to move away from that, I think that would have been very helpful with this. Now, I know this is kind of controversial, but Warner Brothers has released some of their older cartoons, and they've had like a lot of, cartoons that had some messages that wouldn't translate very well in today's economy. And before them, they've always put a warning saying like, hey, this is a product of its time. And I hate to say that because there are some like, they can be translated to racial undertones, I guess would be the proper way to phrase that. But even putting that might be helpful. I don't know. There's so many things that are just weird about this. Like, it's not one of those things that I think Disney should, like someone in Disney should have just been like, why is this getting made? Because at the time I can see how they wouldn't think this was wrong. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah. And it's weird trying to look at this from Disney's point of view, because at the one time, on the one hand, that yes, I feel like that you're not really portraying this era very accurately, but on the other hand, that's not really what this story is about. And I feel like you also don't want to, like, going the other way, and having animosity between the plantation owners and the former slaves on it is not going to make for a very good kid family movie, so I guess Disney kind of put themselves in a pickle, but either way, it's not a really good way to come out of it.
Yeah, totally agree with that. So it's also funny, like you said, that like they could release these as a collection of shorts and have all of the Uncle Remus stuff cut out. But that's weird because after watching this movie, one of the characters I really liked in this was actually Uncle Remus.
Oh yeah.
Like he is a very interesting character.
And James Baskett, who's the person who plays him, just does a fantastic job. But
I think he also won some awards for that role too, which is funny that Disney doesn't acknowledge that at all.
Well, and that's, it's what kind of gets lost in all of it when Disney's tried so hard to kind of pretend like this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But moving back to the plot, again, the main live action storyline is kind of just to get to Uncle Remus telling some tales. The next one that they get to is one of the other controversial ones of this, and it's Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby. Plotline for this one is that Brer Fox is again trying to catch Brer Rabbit, so he makes what is literally a tar baby. It is a baby made out of tar, and this has kind of become a phrase now to say when you get yourself in a situation, the harder you fight it, the worse you get, and that's kind of what happens. Brer Rabbit walks by this tar baby that Brer Fox has made, says hey to it, doesn't say hey back, so he gets in a scuffle with it. It ends up getting stuck to it, and then starts trying to fight with it more, and ends up getting more and more stuck. Brer Fox uses this as a chance to catch Brer Rabbit, and this is where we get the probably most iconic scene from the attraction, which is when Brer Fox is trying to figure out what he's going to do to Brer Rabbit now that he's caught him. And Brer Rabbit says, please, please, whatever you do, don't throw me in that briar patch. Trying to make it seem like that's a bad thing when he actually lives there. So, of course, Brer Fox throws him in the briar patch and he gets away. And this is the scene that we see right before the drop in Splash Mountain.
Because you're literally getting thrown into the briar patch.
Yes.
Yep.
So moving on the plot line, Johnny's mother and Uncle Remus end up having a little bit of a falling out, and Uncle Remus decides to leave the farm or the plantation until Johnny gets to an accident, and Uncle Remus comes back to kind of help him out while he's recovering, and this is when Uncle Remus decides to tell Johnny the story of Brer Rabbit's laughing place to cheer him up. And again, this is another scene, pretty iconic one in the attraction. Other than that, some more attraction tie-ins that we get from the film is obviously the song Zip-A-Dee-Doo-Dah, which is sung multiple times throughout the film. Great catchy tune. I think it fits in perfectly with the attraction.
So I want to take a moment before you continue with the next one. I think it's really funny, and this is just something I've always kind of thought about with this movie in particular. Disney does a really good job of trying to make us forget about this movie, but they really don't make us try to forget Zip-A-Dee-Doo-Dah.
Right.
I wonder if they're just hoping people will be like, hey, this is just an iconic Disney ride. It didn't actually come from anything. It's just, it's like Haunted Mansion.
So before I got really into Disney and all of that, I used to think, and you're going to laugh at me, I used to think that Zip-A-Dee-Doo-Dah was from those Disney sing-along tapes. But that's where I thought that came from. So maybe that's what Disney's trying to do, is they're like, oh, it's from Splash Mountain, or oh, it's from here.
Yeah. Well, I know that Zip-A-Dee-Doo-Dah gets a lot of love and attention, but I personally think the How Do You Do song is catchier.
Oh, it is definitely a brainworm. I definitely, have Zip-A-Dee-Doo-Dah stuck in my head when I get off the attraction, but I feel like How Do You Do gets stuck in my head for even longer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the songs from this attraction are very much earworms in that sense. So anyway, attraction tie-ins. I derailed that for
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, that was pretty much it. With the songs, the film was released and it was financially successful. Obviously, as we talked about, there was a lot of criticism from its release. Initially, there was controversy, obviously, because of just the racial issues, the not very good representation of the time. The NAACP came out and released a statement demeaning Disney for this, for, quote, glorifying slavery and distorting facts. There was also the controversy with the black actors from the films not even being able to go to the premiere that was held in Atlanta. It caused more controversy. Just not handled very well, I think, by Disney. I mean, obviously it makes sense to release it in Atlanta, kind of where a lot of these stories stemmed from, but at the same time, I think you should have been able to realize that this was going to cause issues, and there ended up being protests. And yeah, on top of that, a lot of other critics also criticized Disney for making this film because they saw it as kind of a cop-out way for them to make a cheap movie by using the live-action segments. Disney, hadn't put out a lot of full-length feature films at this point, but from the big ones like Snow White, Pinocchio, at the beginning, now they see these cheaper made animation films coming, and now you see this on top of it. They just felt like Disney was kind of continually stepping down and lowering the quality of their work. So even though this film did make money, it was met with a lot of backlash for several different reasons upon its release.
I think you said it got released in Atlanta?
Yeah, the premiere was in Atlanta.
Like, when the movie came out originally?
Yes.
Yep.
Like, what did they think was going to happen? Like, Atlanta is a very, like, heavily, like, minority inhabited, place.
Yep. It just doesn't seem like a good move on their part.
There's a lot of things that Disney did that they could have just handled so much better.
Yes. So after all of this, Disney decided to use this as a basis for a ride.
So I think that's the best way to transition into this, which is really funny how this all happens. So Disney Imagineer Tony Baxter, who, for those of you that don't know, is behind Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, the original Journey into Imagination Pavilion, Star Tours, a lot of Disneyland Paris, rides like that. He was commuting between the Anaheim Imagineering studio and his house, and he got stuck in traffic and came up with this idea. Around the time that he came up with this idea, they were trying to think of something to rehome the America Sings animatronics into. Attendance had been lacking in this attraction, so Disney decided they were going to close it, which would mean that they had 114 audio animatronics designed by Mark Davis that were going to be without a home. And for those of you that don't know, Mark Davis, it was a Disney animator, and he was responsible for a lot of famous characters. Did work on Snow White, Bambi, Song of the South, Cinderella. He designed Tinkerbell. He also did a lot for Disney Imagineering, like the Jungle Cruise, Enchanted Tiki Room, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, Carousel of Progress. The list goes on and on.
I like... you can cut this if you want, but I like that how you glossed over. Well, America Sings was just not very popular anymore. Had nothing to do with the fact that a girl got crushed in between the walls.
Wait, what?
That's why
that's
ultimately why it got closed, was because people stopped going to it after. Like, it was basically like similar to Carousel of Progress, like rotating theater, and like one of the cast members like got stuck in between when it was rotating and got crushed in between the walls and died.
Man,
we could do like a whole series on like these kinds of attractions, because there's a lot of backstory with this.
Yeah, so I can imagine not really wanting to go into a ride where a girl died. Like, I mean, I'm sure other rides, but not that one was it was very heavily, like, publicized. So.
Oh, yeah.
But now they have, like, breakaway walls, so at least there's that.
Yeah, but they didn't then, and unfortunately,
yep.
An accident caused this to, well, it was still open after that, but it like, attendance
just, like,
was
ruined
not,
the reputation of it, yeah.
Yeah, it was not what they wanted it to be. But originally, Tony Baxter pitches the idea to Imagineering as a log flume, and the attraction is going to be called Zip-A-Dee River Run, and they're going to place it in Bear Country, which at the time really only had Country Bears and Country Bears. America Sings was over in Tomorrowland, if I remember this correctly from my research. So they were going to place this in Bear Country and Disneyland, and when he pitched it to Imagineering, the one thing that came back was, well, other parks have log flumes. We need to innovate on that idea. What can we do differently? So they started kind of coming up with this idea to maybe make it more of a story attraction to tie in the log flume as well. So what they ended up doing was they moved all of the America Sings animatronics into Splash Mountain. If you go on I don't think ours has them, but I think ours are like modeled after that one. But the Disneyland version has the actual original animatronics from America Sings on it, and they're all on the riverboat scene at the end of the attraction. So they kind of took what we were talking about, where they took the stories of Briar Fox and Briar Rabbit and Briar Bear, and they mixed them in without putting the live action segments in there. And they told the story of Song of the South without the live action bits. after all this idea had come up, Michael Eisner decided that he wanted to change the name from Zip-A-Dee River Run to Splash Mountain.
I love this story because every time I hear it, it makes less and less sense.
So, for those of you that don't know, Touchstone Pictures is a division of Disney Studios, and around the time that this idea was going around, a couple years prior, Ron Howard's film Splash with Tom Hanks was released under Touchstone Films. So what Michael Eisner decided he wanted to do was, in order to promote the film Splash, he wanted to put some kind of tie-ins into this attraction. So originally the idea was that Michael Eisner wanted to add a mermaid to Splash Mountain, which I don't know where you would put that, and thank goodness Michael Eisner was not in Imagineering, because that would make no sense.
You know, I don't hate Michael Eisner as much as I feel like the average Disney fan does, because I respect that he came in at a time when Disney was not in a good place, and financially he kind of worked them through that. But good God, was that man out of touch with what Disney was doing on a creative scale? Holy crap.
He had so many dumb ideas.
Well, and that's the funny thing. Like, I talk about this attraction so much, but my favorite Michael Eisner story is how he brought his son in to the parks, and his son was like, "Dad, this is for kids." And the idea that came out of that was Alien Encounter. Like, but I find Michael Eisner like super fascinating for that reason.
Michael Eisner was also heavily involved in Superstar Limo, so take that for what it's worth.
Anyway,
the first and second most terrifying attractions at Disney.
So the Imagineering pushed back, and they were like, a mermaid's not going to fit in Splash Mountain. There's no way that we can fit a mermaid into Song of the South. So what they decided that they were going to do was that because this attraction would be close enough to the other Disney mountains, it would fit better to have mountain in the name. So instead of putting Zip-A-Dee River Run as the attraction's title, they changed it to Splash Mountain to kind of compromise. And I don't think I'll ever be able to look at Splash Mountain the same again. Along with that, Splash Mountain opens in 1989, and it also changes Bear Country's name to Critter Country in Disneyland, because at this point, all of the America Sings animatronics weren't bears, they were critters. Just made more sense. And as a result of its success, Michael Eisner thought, okay, we have to put this in every Disney park. The two that it made it into were Disney World in Florida and Tokyo Disneyland. As the plan started to kind of develop for Tokyo Disneyland's version, Imagineering found that Japanese culture found that it wouldn't be comfortable with the single seating that Disneyland's version of Splash Mountain has. So they changed the log configuration to side-by-side seating instead of single file rows. And it also made more sense for Florida's version as well, just because it would put a larger capacity of guests through the attraction.
Man, now if they could just do that with Space Mountain.
Oh goodness, could you imagine? That line would be reduced greatly.
I know.
Yeah, so 1990 construction of Splash Mountain starts, and it requires a complete reconfiguration of Frontierland, which is weird to me because it's in a weird spot, and I've talked about that before. With that, the old train station had to be torn down and moved, and it was also used as a visual buffer in the landscaping, blending the Wild West theming of Frontierland and the theming around Splash Mountain, just because Wild West and Deep South aren't exactly the closest related thing. So this also was the first time in Disney history that the Walt Disney World Railroad could not run, which I think is kind of fitting considering we're in a time now where it's not going to run because of the Tron coaster.
Yeah, that used to be a big deal to Disney back then, and now they're just like, shut it down.
Yeah, just park the trains at the station and people will take pictures with them. But part of this renovation, the Imagineers also changed the elevation in some of the tracks to allow people to walk under the train tracks to get to the Splash Mountain queue. Yeah, and like you said, it was a huge deal that this was down because for several months the train ran back and forth from Main Street and what was Mickey's Starland at the time, and my notes from 2009 say Mickey's Toontown Fair. But yeah, once the new train portion was opened, you could run right through a portion of the scene where the riverboat was, which I don't ever remember that. I also feel like I haven't taken the train in years. Do either of you remember that? Or is that a thing?
It's been a while since I've been on the train, too.
Yeah, it's been a while for me, but I definitely remember it.
All right, we're all bad Disney fans here.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it just takes so much time.
It does. And since we're going for 8 days this next trip, I might actually do it. But man, it just does not. This is not a thing that I've needed to do in a long time.
Yeah.
But Splash Mountain officially opened in Walt Disney World on July 17th, 1992, 3 years after it opened at Disneyland. And that is the history of Splash Mountain. Significantly more underwhelming than the history of the Haunted Mansion.
Well, I think it's definitely got interesting points. And the biggest one to me is just the kind of the time scale on this. You know, you've got a movie that opened up 40 years ago that was met with a lot of controversy, and you decided to use that as the basis for this attraction. I mean, I love Splash Mountain for sure. It just is such an odd choice for Disney to use it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also really cool, like, even though I really do enjoy Disney history, I never would have thought that so many famous people had a hand in this attraction, even though it is a Disney classic, and you can definitely, like, knowing where they come from, you can see the different art styles coming together. But just knowing that Mark Davis worked on this without directly working on it, and Tony Baxter worked on it, and there's just so much depth to that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I definitely think it shows in the attraction itself. I mean, it does a great job of storytelling. I mean, it's another one that I feel like we've overlooked on the podcast a lot when we've talked about superlatives and that kind of stuff, because I think it has a fantastic queue, has some of the best songs of an attraction, and like it generally has a pretty good wait, but I feel like because it's so long, it's one of the best bang for your buck attractions as far as wait times.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think this is one that I'm definitely guilty of not going on as much as I should have. Now, granted, I think this was on my most likely to break down for superlatives, which that's definitely true. But I do really love this attraction. So we breezed way through that history. If you guys have anything else to talk about with this.
Well, I think Haunted Mansion took a lot longer because the ride itself took a lot longer.
Yeah, that's true. If it had gone as easy as this one went, there wouldn't have been much story.
You know, the funny thing about this, though, I think this one is one of those attractions that maybe in the future we'll have to go back through and look at America Sings and look at the attractions that kind of played a hand into this. Because even just the history of, like, just how Splash Mountain came to be it's cool, but there's more to it than just this 1 hour is going to allow. Like, if we went back and we were like, this is what America Sings was, this is why it came out, this is what happened with it, like, that maybe would have given us like a solid 2 hours, but that's even condensing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we should add that to our list, like go through some of the former attractions that precursored some other ones and how they made them great.
All right. What are your favorite scenes from Splash Mountain?
Oh, this is like so cliche, but I'm not even ashamed to say it. I love the riverboat scene. Like the reveal on that is really cool that you just come around the corner and it's this big grand scene. I think one of my favorite things that Disney does are those large scale scenes. Like my personal favorite scene in Pirates is when you turn the corner and you see the giant, like the boat and the Barbossa animatronics on it. Like that's my favorite scene in Pirates too. So I think when Disney does large scale things like that, that's just to me it really shows that Disney Imagineering can use what they have and make their own little world in this tiny section of the park.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like it's everyone's answer, but it's mine too.
What about you, Brian?
I really like the laughing place scene, and it's mainly a nostalgia thing. But what I love about Splash is that like when you're going to the ride, you know, the first thing you see as you're walking towards it is the drop at the end, and everybody screaming coming off of it, the water splashing and everything. So I always remember, like, as a kid getting on, I was always nervous because I knew there's a drop at the end. So then I would, you know, you see that coming up to it, but then you get on the ride, and like the ride is so long and it's so well themed up until that point, you kind of like almost forget like that the drop's coming, or at least I did as a kid. And so I would always is like, oh great, you know, you're kind of just going through like a dark ride almost till you get up there. And every time at the laughing place, it was like it would hit me. I was like, oh crap, I forgot. Like right after this is the scary part when it builds up to the drop. So I always like the laughing place because of that.
I think that's a great scene too, because there's a lot of like auditorial cues that tell you what's coming next. Like the entire ride is very carefree. The music itself is very lighthearted and bouncy and upbeat, but then you start to hit the laughing place, and even as you start to climb that hill, you can hear like almost a shift in the key in the music. It sounds more like a minor key than it is in a major key, and you hear like the bees and the two vultures, I think they are, that tell you to turn back, and like just the entire ride shifts at this one point, and it just completely does a 180 from being so lighthearted and carefree, even though, you know, Briar Rabbit's going through all this stuff and like just narrowly escaping it. You should at this point know that you're going to just narrowly escape the briar patch, but just that 1 second of like a complete 180 pivot is so interesting and cool to the ride's design. I think that's like they did that perfectly.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't know offhand, but this is definitely one attraction that I can't really recall any major update ever occurring with this.
It goes under a refurbishment almost like every other year, I want to say.
But no changes to the attraction, right? I mean,
it's always general maintenance.
Yeah.
I mean, I know
that's interesting.
It hasn't been there a super long time, but it's got a pretty good run with nothing really changed with it. And I think that really speaks to how good of a job the Imagineers did on the first time around with it.
Well, if you think about it that way, too, it's been there since 92, which is 26 years. And yeah, I know everyone on this podcast is sighing right now. But yeah, it's been there 26 years, and there are rides that have been there way shorter that have gotten overhauled way quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's one thing I kind of want to go back, and I meant to mention this when we were talking about the movie. But I was listening to a podcast, and I can't remember which one it was, and I found a few of them after we did our Disney movie run through that go through each Disney movie in order, and like they're watching them and then talking about like the life lessons and stuff. So there's a couple of them, and if I remember them, I'll throw them in the show notes. But one of the ones I was listening to was talking about like the morality behind Song of the South, and how there's actually a very clear and concise message between both the live action portions and the animated portions of the film. And the bigger, larger lesson that is told through the actual tales is that you can't quite run away from your problems because they'll always catch up to you. And I think that that's one that Disney really hasn't ever revisited. And it's a really interesting message. I really wish that Disney would like do something to bring this movie out of the hiding.
That's a good point. I've never really thought about that.
Yeah, and if you think about it, because every time that Brer Rabbit runs away from something or gets out of a situation, it does eventually come back to him in the end. Like, that's the big thing. I think the finale scene is where he's trying to run away from home, if I remember correctly. And he does eventually realize that his home is the briar patch. And even in the beginning of the movie, Johnny's trying to run away from home because his parents are splitting up, and he's not happy about that. So if you think about it from that perspective, and he gets the story told to him through Uncle Remus, who does tell him, like, hey, listen, you can't just run away. That's not going to solve everything. Either way, both of the stories come to that nice conclusion together. And I think that that's a really cool device that Disney needs to do again if they're going to do something like this. But I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again.
Probably not.
But I am actually surprised we haven't seen anything. Talking about Song of the South again, I'm surprised we haven't seen anything come out of that, because when Whoopi Goldberg was added to the Disney Legends, she made it in her speech that she wanted Song of the South to be released from the vault because she said that we can't run away from our past mistakes, which, funny enough, is the story, as the moral of the film.
Well, I think it brings up a good point, like you were talking about earlier with Warner Brothers, still releasing these, very, very controversial cartoons. And if you've seen any of them, I mean, they are incredibly...
They're worse than Song of the South, I would say.
They're terrible. And the thing is that I feel like Disney is almost making it worse. That, yes, Song of the South had parts in it that were very insensitive, but I feel like this whole clout over the movie that they've made by trying to hide it, by not releasing it in America and everything, has set up this controversy, and it makes it seem a lot worse than it is.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
I also feel like if they hadn't made a deal out of it, that no one else would remember it. I mean, I guess because Splash exists, people maybe would look into it, but I feel like it's such a taboo thing that has made people seek it out more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case. Anytime it's brought up in conversation, it's always, oh, it's that movie. I don't think the movie's all that great. I do think that Disney should release it because it is a very interesting piece of material for its time, and it's something that I think we should really study, in the sense that, there's a lot to learn from this, not just from the moral of the film, but from where Disney was at the time and, the outrage that they received with it. But, it's always brought up as Disney's forgotten child, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you guys want to talk about with Splash Mountain? Anything that, you have fond memories of with this attraction? I know we did that kind of with Haunted Mansion.
I have a question for you guys. Do you ever actually get super soaked
It is
when you ride it?
It's a complete crapshoot.
100%.
Yeah, sometimes I will get absolutely soaked. Sometimes not a drop on me.
I feel like the only time I ever really get wet is not actually from the splash. It's from the water jets.
Mm-hmm.
And the boat rocking. I get more wet from the actual ride rocking back and forth and knocking water into the cart than I do the actual drop.
And I see, I don't mind. I don't know what it is, but I'm fine if I get wet, actually going down the drop. But I hate when you make that turn and there's that part that squirts water over
my gosh.
intermittently. So you're sitting there oh my God, is it gonna get me? Is it gonna get me or not? It's just getting closer to it.
Yeah, I would say 9 times out of 10, I get more wet riding Pirates than I do this.
That's true. Now, question for you is, do you feel like you get more wet in the front of the car, or because I've always felt that way, if I'm the front row of the vehicle, I feel like I'm going to get soaked, or at least like significantly more damp than anyone else in the car. But any other time I haven't been in the front, I feel like I haven't gotten wet.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Well, at least I'm not the only one on that one.
You just got to make sure you like tip your toes up so that the water doesn't go into your shoes.
Oh, that's the worst.
That is the absolute worst.
I literally had to throw away a pair of shoes that way. They just were beyond repair.
I still stand by the fact that this is the attraction most likely to break down.
I've never... I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but I don't remember a time where I was there that it broke down.
Well, I can tell you that every time I have been to Disney with my girlfriend, it has not been functioning.
Well, they close it for lightning strikes, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, and like when they close it for a refurb, it's like a 9-month refurb.
Yeah.
Like they drain that entire attraction and they just do all the work they can to it, and then it's up and running for like a while, and then they do it again. I told her the last time we were talking about like Disney planning and stuff, I was like, you know, you haven't done Splash Mountain, so we have to do that like first thing next time. And she's still kind of fighting me on that because she thinks she's going to get wet.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like a hot day, then it's usually fine because you'll dry off pretty quickly. But I also, like, I can sympathize because I hate being wet.
Now, let me ask you, that brings up a good question. When is the perfect time to ride Splash Mountain?
Middle of the day when it's really hot.
But that's when it's super crowded because everyone else has got the same idea.
Well, with a fast pass.
I'm going to say, I have to say my favorite time to ride Splash Mountain is, and I'm like the weird person that does stuff like this, but I love to ride Splash Mountain during the fireworks. Because you get that nice view right outside of the drop. And it's not a very like fast drop either, so if you time it perfectly, you can get it as the fireworks are going up, and it's a really cool view.
Nice. I've never done that.
How does one time that perfectly?
It's more of a luck thing than like an actual timing. But if you could pull it off, it's really cool. So I think we've just about exhausted all of our efforts to try to make this last long. So I want to close this. We actually got a new iTunes review, and I'm very excited about that. But first, I totally forgot to ask, is there anything you guys want to talk about before we dive into these closing remarks here?
Nope.
Okay, cool. So we actually got an iTunes review this week. I am very excited about that. I love when we get iTunes reviews, emails, stuff like that we can talk about at the end of the show. This one wasn't really a question, but more of like a compliment, so I'll take that, and I'm very happy about it. iTunes user Battery Wombat said, I'm a 24-year-old grown man, theme park nerd with no kids who loves all things theme park. I really appreciate the varied and interesting topics that the hosts bring to the show. They have a solid knowledge of history. Sorry about this week. And a great knowledge of current park happenings. Keep it up, guys. Glad to support you with a 5-star review. Again, I will say 5-star reviews are the best way to support the show because that puts us in a good spot on the iTunes charts, and it brings new people to the show, which means that we get more questions, more things to talk about, more stuff to do, and it kind of keeps this going for as long as we can. So yeah, I'm very happy about that. Thank you, Battery Wombat. And if you have anything else that you want us to talk about, let us know. We'll be happy to talk about them on the show. Then that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Station 71 podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast from. And while you're there, leave us a review as well. If you want to get in touch with us or find us on any of our social media accounts, you can find links to our show notes at station71podcast.com. You can also send us your questions, comments, concerns to station71podcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail that we'll be happy to play back on the next episode at 561-899-6441. We hope you enjoyed your ride, and we'll see you real soon.
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.